Are you getting ready for the Certified Quality Auditor exam, but you don't know which resources you should be using or how to use them? Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you the resources I use to prepare myself with a self-study plan to pass the exam in my first attempt. So if that's interesting for you, watch until the end because I have many tips that is going to be very helpful. So let's get into it. Hey quality auditors, my name is C.B. Russell and I'm a certified quality auditor with over 13 years of experience in the quality auditing field. In the last 6 years, I've been working as a third-party auditor and I recently passed the CQA exam. In this video, I'm going to share with you the exact study materials I use, what was my study plan to use these resources efficiently. I'm going to be explaining how I use these study resources during the preparation for the exam and also on the exam day. So let's get started. So firstly, the right resources to use for the CQA exam. Before you have a study plan and how you're going to prepare for the exam day, having the right resources is extremely important. In my case, I use 2 study resources for my self-study plan. So the first resource I used was the Certified Quality Auditor Handbook, the 5th edition in my case. This resource I bought from Amazon, but you can also buy from the ASQ website. The main reason I highly recommend this handbook is that it follows all the topics included in the Book of Knowledge. This is very important to make sure you don't skip any topic because many times in your experience might not include all the topics from the exam. And the handbook is going to guarantee that you know that everything you need and be prepared for the exam day. As I was preparing for the exam, I found some mock tests online where I was testing my knowledge just to see how far I was from the exam. And as I started to test my knowledge with those questions that I found online, I realized that there was many things included in the exam that I didn't know. And that's when I also realized that I did need some external resources and be prepared for the exam. Another important point to think is about how you're going to use your material before the exam and on the exam day. Before the exam, I decided to read the entire book. Yeah, I'm not a huge reader, even though I have many books on my bookshelf that I want to read, and some of them I started, but let's say I'm not a fast reader. But when I started to test my knowledge, I realized that I needed to study the handbook. So I created a very simple Excel spreadsheet. I included all the chapters that I included in this handbook, and I wrote the date that I was planning to read and the date that I actually read. So this helped me to be consistent in seeing the results day after day. Sometimes it's very tiring as I had to study in the evenings, but with this I could see my progress day by day. And another thing I did is to mark the index with the letters of the questions that you're going to be looking for on your exam day. This is an idea I got from another YouTube and I highly recommend because even though on the index page you can find the letters, when you're doing the exam, you want to do as quickly as possible. You want to find the answers as quickly as possible. So doing these marks here helps you to get into the topic that you're looking for much quicker. Therefore, I highly recommend you to do this weeks in advance. And so when you're preparing for the exam and studying, you start practicing using these as part of your study plan as well. A common question that I saw online and people ask me is about using the handbook for the exam. And yes, you can bring this handbook for your exam day, even if you have highlighted or if you have notes. I also, for example, another thing I do recommend, especially for those who doesn't have English as the first language, is to prepare a little translator. At the end of the book, it does have some empty pages that says notes. And I created some notes here for myself, and I also included a page where I have a little translator. Let's say if the question had any important word in English that I didn't know the meaning, and hopefully it would be on my translator note. So if you have notes or highlighted things like I have in many pages, that's totally fine. You can still use the handbook for your exam day. All right, so the second resource I used was the CQA question bank provided by the American Society for Quality. And you can find this in the ASQ website. The question bank is very important because it helps you with active recall. It meaning that as you study with the handbook, the questions will help you to really understand each topic. So on the exam day, there's 165 questions. So you want to remember things that studied. And I don't know about you, but for me, it was very common to study something or read something, for example, a book or sometimes even a movie. And the next day, I don't remember anything or just parts. And with the exam, even though you have the handbook that you can use to look for answers, you're not going to have time to look for all the answers. So as much as you know, as much as you remember is going to save you time during the exam. So testing your knowledge is one of the most effective ways to study for any exam. I didn't know that before my CQA exam, so I started watching YouTube videos as I was starting to prepare for my exam, and I find out that reading, highlighting, and taking notes are the least effective ways to learn anything. And the most effective way is active recall. So asking yourself as you're studying, taking notes, having flashcards, and asking yourself. So the question bank is very important for you to study with that purpose in mind. Studying and remember things over time. Another important thing about the CQA question bank is to help you to familiarize with the exam format. It mimics the exam, but I do have to tell you that it's not exactly the same. Another important thing to mention about the question bank, different than the handbook that you can take to the exam, the question bank and the questions from the question bank, obviously, you cannot take to the exam. Even if you copy the questions, write down as you study and take that paper to the exam, question format resources for the exam is not acceptable. So let's say if you copy the questions and you have all the questions written on a paper and you take it to the exam as a resource, once the person on your exam review your material, they're going to see that those notes are question format, and that's not acceptable. However, as you study, if you want to take notes as a notes example, not as a question format, then you can still use on the resources. However, it's also important to note that it's not possible for you to take 3 pages like this for the exam. It does need to be binded for you to use as a resource on the exam day. As talking about the resources, last important point is that both resources are extremely helpful because they complement each other. They help you in your study journey in different ways. The handbook covers all the topics of the book of knowledge, and the question bank works as an active recall to make sure that you understood and you remember and really learn the topics that you're studying throughout your study journey. All right, having the 2 resources on your hands is very important, but how to use them? I created a study plan that helped me to stay on track and use the 2 resources efficiently. And I highly recommend you to use if you have not much time available, like I didn't. So in the early journey of my preparation, I prepared a study plan to make sure I use the 2 resources I had in hand effectively. So if you don't have much time available to your preparation, it certainly is going to work for you because I didn't have much time. So my plan was study for 1 hour the handbook as reading the materials. As a habit, I was still highlighting every now and then. And then the other hour, I was using the CQA question bank to test my knowledge based on the chapters that I just studied. The question bank comes with a set of 3 exams. So it's about 165 questions per set. And when you jump into the CQA question bank online platform, you can choose if you want to do set 1, 2, or 3. And as you jump into the set you choose of the questions, you can choose to do as a mock test, where the questions are mixed up and also it's timed, or you can choose to study on their own, which means you can choose which part of the exam you want to study from 1 to 5. So for example, when I was reading the handbook and I was reading part 1, then I go to the exam and I could choose to study questions related to part 1 of the exam. So that's very useful and helpful. As you started to advance on the exam, on the handbook, on your study journey, I do recommend you studying and practicing the time test because this gives you some practice on reading questions faster and make decisions faster, because on the exam you don't have much time to go question by question. So getting prepared and used to look at the time throughout the exam is very helpful. So for me, because of only studying 10 hours a week, I prepare myself for about 3 months for the exam. And I do have to mention that I prepare myself considering some change of schedule. So for example, I had my sister coming to visit us from overseas. So I did consider that for those 2-3 weeks, I wasn't going to study much. So if you have a holiday or something like that, make sure you plan that in advance before you schedule your exam. Another important point to consider is to avoid skipping chapters that you think are easy or that you know. It's very important to read each chapter of the exam and not skip anything so you feel prepared for the exam day. So if you think that any of this is useful and helpful for you, make sure you click to the subscribe button, and I'm going to be sharing many more videos about the CQA exam. If you are already studying for the exam and you'd like to have more resources available for you to study, go to the website thequalityauditor.com, where you can find a free CQA sample question bank. It's a bit less than 100 questions where you can use to study. They are also very similar to the style of questions from the exam, and you can have a good idea of what you're going to be finding on the CQA question bank. So let's say it can be your starting point for the question bank. However, if you already purchased the CQA question bank, those questions are not specifically the same of the question bank. Some of them are, but not all of them. So I still recommend you to go to thequalityauditor.com and download your copy of the free CQA sample question. What is the purpose of studying efficiently, using the study plan, and be prepared for the exam if you miss your exam day? Yeah, that's what almost happened with me. And in this next video, I'm going to share how you can avoid this stressful moment that happened with me, and you have a very easy and relaxing start of exam and succeed from the first minute. So make sure you watch this video, and I see you there.